So I'm going to start with a question this morning. And I want you to think about this one deeply. Is there anyone in your life right now that you wish you'd never met? I love the nervous laughter that question generates. This week I was telling Wally I was going to ask this question. Wally's first response, his visceral response to me was, "Oh my gosh, I hope they don't yell my name out loud." That's kind of like clubbing a baby seal, I think, to do that with Wally's name at that point. You know, he's just so kind and loving, and I wish I'd never met him. Not true. I want to ask the question again. I want you to think seriously about this, and here's just like this relationship clue for you this morning, for some of us that are a little more clueless. When I ask the question, it's not a great point to look to your left or your right, okay? Keep your eyes fixed straight ahead, think about you, and think about this question. Is there anyone in your life right now that you wish you'd never met? Anyone in your spouse's life you wish they'd never met? Anybody in your kids' lives that you wish they'd never met? It's an important question for us to wrestle with for one simple reason, because some of the deepest regrets in people's lives are tied to the people they were with in that moment. Paul put it this way in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, "Don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." And we know it's true. Almost always when we do something we later regret, there's a person connected to that event. In fact, when I asked the question, some of you started going way back decades in your life. Some of you went back to your freshman year of college or your senior year of high school, and you went, yeah, there's some regrets. There's some people I wish I'd never met. Our decisions, our actions, our times and circumstances in our life where we look back and just pray, God, could I please get a do-over? Could I try that again? That was a huge mistake in my life. There usually is a face that pops into our mind with that event. And though that person's not responsible for our choices, we're responsible for our own choices. People in our lives can influence us to push through guardrails, to do something we might not otherwise do, personally, morally, in our business, professionally, and in our closest relationships. And these people are not typically strangers to us. They are not our enemies. These are people tied to our regrets who we know well, and maybe were our closest friends. Our greatest regrets are often tied to the people we've met. So Paul was right. Don't be deceived. Don't be misled. Don't lie to yourself. Bad company, it has a way of corrupting good character. Good morning, everybody. You just leave it at the question and just let's all go home now? No, I'm going to poke around in it a little bit. This morning we're wrapping up our 4-week series, Guardrails. And for the last 3 Sundays, we've been talking about the idea that some of our biggest challenges, some of our biggest regrets in our life have come when we've crashed through the guardrails or we just simply didn't have them in place in our life. And the key verse for this whole series is this from Paul in Ephesians. He says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise." So this morning, we're going to talk specifically about how that idea of guardrails applies to our relationships in our life, the people we run with, the people we hang out with, we share meals with, the people we work with, those people who are in our lives on a regular, consistent basis. And let me just start with something that I know is going to be cropping into your head as we talk about this. We'll just get rid of this one before we dive into the heart of this. What we're talking about this morning can sound a lot like I'm encouraging you to be judgmental about the people in your life. That's not it at all. I'm asking you to use sound judgment in your life. And there's a big difference. It's what the Bible refers to as wisdom. When I'm judgmental, it comes because I've formed an opinion about the things that you are saying and the things that you are doing and how you should do them differently. I've got strong opinions then about your behaviors and choices, and that comes out when I talk to you, or more often when I talk to other people about you and what you should do. That's being judgmental. The Bible is really clear that we should not put ourselves in that place. We shouldn't be judgmental towards the people in our lives. In fact, Jesus said it very simply, don't judge, or what? You'll be judged. In fact, I like the way the Message paraphrase just embellishes that and makes it really painfully clear. Eugene Peterson writes in that translation, he says, don't pick on people. Don't jump on their failures. Don't criticize their faults unless, of course, you want the same treatment. That critical spirit has a way of boomeranging. I love that. So don't judge. We're not supposed to put ourselves in that place. Just to be crystal clear, being judgmental is all about you. It's how I view you. It's how I think about you. It's what I think you should do in your life. Good judgment is all about me. Good judgment is looking at my decisions, my actions, my behavior. Thinking of things in terms of, in light of my past experiences, the things that are tempting to me in my life, my last relationship, my last marriage, my last job, all my experiences, how I grew up, in light of my past experiences and in light of my current circumstances. What's my mood right now? If I'm really angry, if I'm really sad, what's my mood right now? My current situation, maybe I just ended a relationship. Maybe I've just started a new job. So in light of my past experiences, in light of my current circumstances, and in light of my future hopes and dreams, what's the wise thing to do? I don't get to decide the wise thing that you should do. I don't get to judge you. What you do, frankly, is none of my business. Setting a relational guardrail is not about judging in your life. It's not about what people should do. So when I'm trying to sort out the wise thing in my life to do, in my relationship to God, my relationship to the people around me, that's just simply sound judgment. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, in a job I had before I came to Westridge, I was offered a new role. If I accepted the new role in that organization, it was a promotion, it meant more pay, it meant greater opportunities, more recognition. But the more I thought about that, there was a problem. I realized that the work habits, the leadership style, the personality of the person that I would report to in that new role, they would be toxic for me. And in a rare display of wisdom, my wife added those notes in for me. In a rare display of wisdom, I was able to verbalize that to my current boss. And I said, you know what? Everybody has their own style of leadership. Everyone has their own work pace. But I know, in light of my past experiences, that the personality and the leadership style of that person would play directly into my weaknesses and my woundedness in my own life. So I'm going to take a pass on this. She could not understand, did not understand in the moment what I was doing. But for me, it was not about that person. It was about me. And what's the wise thing for me to do? Does that make sense? Well, that's not encouraging. There's a big difference between me judging you and me using good judgment about my life. What we learn as we figure this all out, as we walk through life, is that our relationships often determine the direction and the quality of our life. So we have to exercise good judgment when we get into relationships, when we get out of relationships. Proverbs says, the righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. I believe that relationships are God's gift to us. In the story of creation in Genesis, God actually says it is not good for man to be what? Alone. We need each other. Without friends, life would be boring, life would be lonely, it would not be as good as it could possibly be. But good judgment teaches us that not all friendships are worth our time. While some friends are worth dying for, other friends only lead us to disappointment and regret and frustration. We have to choose our relationships wisely. I don't know what your mom was like when you were growing up, but this was something my mom hammered over and over and over again. Choose your friend wisely. Choose who you're running with. Choose who you're hanging around. And she did her best to always figure out like the dirt on the families of the kids I was running around with, she'd come back to me and say, that kid's up to no good. And I go, how do you know? And she'd tell me stuff. I go, really? I give my mom a lot of credit because she doesn't have the tools that are available to parents today. Parents today can track their kids on their smartphone. I just would have been all over that with my kids when they were teenagers. You can get on Facebook and social media. You can dig into the family history of the kids that your child, your son, your daughter are hanging around. And I mean, you know you do, right? I mean, often by the time we meet our kids or I meet our grandkids' friends, you know where they live. You can even Google their address and see what their house looks like. You can get all judgmental about how they keep it up and how they don't, or how big it is, or how small it is. You can go on social media and find out where the parents work, what kind of a job they have, what kind of a car they drive. You can even, if you're willing to pay a few bucks, you can search their criminal record. You may be one of those people who have a 3-inch file folder at home, or the equivalent on your hard drive of your kids' friends. You have a lot of tools available to you. Why? Why do we do this kind of stuff? Because we know who we hang with influences who we become. Now, that's not just Scripture. That's not just my mom's wisdom. I found out this week, I was so surprised, that's actually supported by scientific research. I think my mom told me that and I didn't believe her, and it hadn't been at that time. The influence our relationships have on us is not just behavioral, it's neurological. And what I'm about to share with you is both fascinating and scary at the same time. This is deeply embedded in our brains. And we have little or no control over those neurological processes. Morin Cerf is a neuroscientist at Northwestern University. He's been studying relationships and their impact on decision making for over a decade. Here's what he discovered. I'll give you like 3 quotes out of this lengthy deal that he printed as a conclusion to some of that research. He said, the more we study engagement, we see time and again that just being next to certain people actually aligns your brain with them. I saw some of you look at the person beside you and go, well, this is scary. Because even as you're sitting here this morning, your brain waves, if we had an EEG on each one of you this morning, you would start to see how the patterns of your brain waves are lining up to the people around you. It's a crazy thing. He goes on to say, if people want to maximize happiness, anybody want that? Like 3? Wow. This one will get more. Anybody want to minimize stress? If you want to maximize happiness and minimize stress, you should build a life that requires fewer decisions by surrounding yourself with people who embody the traits you prefer. That's fascinating. You surround yourself with people who are living out the traits that you want in your life, and without any effort, he says, without any decisions or actions on your part, your brain will line up with theirs, which leads to more happiness and less stress. Why? Because over time, you will naturally pick up those desirable attitudes and behaviors just from the people you hang around. Before our behavior choices are made, our attitude changes when we're around people. Our brain waves line up. We become alike in the way that we process information, in the way that we make decisions. Simply doing life with people changes us for the better or the worse. Now, just a pause. I'll do a little commercial here. This is why in my life, for the last 30 years, there have only been brief windows where I'm not in community, where I'm in a couples group with my wife, where I'm in a men's group with just some guys hanging out, because I know, based on what the Bible says, now I know based on scientific research, that if I'm around people who are trying to live the kind of life I'm trying to live, if I hang with them, they'll influence me if they never say a word. Our brains will line up, for better or worse. 3,000 years ago, before any of this research or science was available, King Solomon made a similar observation. He wrote in Proverbs, he said, walk with the wise and become wise. Without any conscious effort, without studying, without memorizing scripture, without passing any kind of a test, you're going to become wise. If you spend time with wise people, you'll become wise. Why? Because it's contagious. Second part of the verse gives a contrast. It says, you can walk with the wise and become wise, or some translations say, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Now, we don't call people fools much in our day and time. But in Solomon's day, that was a really common word. And if you go back and you study the text, you understand that in Solomon's day, calling somebody a fool meant that they lacked wisdom about how all of life and all of our decisions are interconnected. A fool is somebody in the Bible pictured as someone who lives just for today. A fool is someone who's just not careful in how they live. What's curious to me is Solomon doesn't say that if you hang out with fools, you'll become a fool. I would think that would be the natural consequence. He says it's actually much worse than that. Become wise by walking with the wise, hang out with fools, and watch your life fall to pieces. When their life begins to fall apart, the odds are really high that yours will too. Now, you may be sitting here thinking, yeah, I get that. I mean, I understand that, and I have some friends who don't really make great choices in their life, but it's okay. I hang out with them, and I don't make the dumb decisions that they make. Morin Cerf, the neuroscientist, Solomon, wisest man that ever lived, both of them said, hang around those people long enough, you probably will start making those dumb decisions. Research proves it. Solomon argues for it. He warns us. He says, look, if you're hanging around people who smoke, who drink to excess, who talk bad about people they're in relationships with, over time, your life is going to begin to line up with theirs, and the odds are really good that your behavior will too. We'll follow their actions. We'll follow their emotions. We'll follow their attitudes and behaviors more and more as our brains align. Solomon says, and the results of that are worse than becoming a fool. You're not only going to destroy your own life, you're going to catch shrapnel from their life as they destroy theirs. At some point, we'll suffer the same harm and damage as they have. The Bible teaches that wise people understand friends who aren't careful with their life are not going to be careful with yours. If they're not careful with their health, with their relationships, with their marriage, with their finances, with their reputation, they're not going to be careful with yours. And that's part of what makes this marvelous thing of friendship so dangerous for us as well. I am confident that relationships are a gift from God for us. I am confident that in good friendships, you've learned how to relax, how to get comfortable, how to just be authentic, be yourself, drop your guard. And I'm not advocating to change any of that. We need relationships like that in our lives. But even the best of relationships can seem like they're heading on a good course, and they can drift into the guardrails. And the point of a guardrail in our relationships is to light up our conscience, to warn us before we get into the danger zone. So what I want to do with the little bit of time we have left this morning is just talk about some guardrails, give you some suggestions for some that you could think about implementing in your relationships in your life. And I think I've worked really hard to try to make this so that it would apply to any of our students. Middle school, high school students are here. Some of our, all the way up to, senior citizen adults. I have worked hard to make this not a male, female thing. It's not even a Christian, non-Christian thing. If you're here this morning, you're not sure about Jesus and you're not sure you believe his claims, this stuff is just wise for relationships. So think about this. And as you think about it, I, again, want to encourage you, don't try to think of how to apply this to your spouse's life, to your friends' lives, to your kids' or your grandkids' lives. Think about yourself and your relationships and where you might just implement these guardrails in your life. So let me give you 5 quickly. 1, when it dawns on me that my core group is not moving in the direction I want my life to move. You've bumped into a guardrail. We get uneasy in our spirit that this group isn't moving in the way we want to move. It's a warning. We're scraping the guardrail. And if you're a believer, what we would say in that moment is the Holy Spirit is nudging you. He's whispering in your ear, be wise, be careful with your life. Now, when you sense that warning, what do? There's not one prescription for all of us. There's not one prescription for all your relationships. When you bump into the guardrail, it just causes you to step back, or it needs to say, what's the wise thing? Depending on the quality of the relationship or the relationship with the group, you might be able to raise the subject, talk about it as a group, and get back on course. But if the relationships are not at that point, it may mean limiting or ending those relationships. Not because you're judging them, but because it's the wise thing to do in your life. Here's another one to consider. When I catch myself pretending to be someone other than who I really am. When I find myself sitting in a conversation and things are being said, and on the outside I'm nodding my head and agreeing, but on the inside, my heart, my mind, everything inside of me is screaming, no, I don't agree with this. Why am I not saying something? You've just bumped into a guardrail. And the scary thing is that in those moments, your brainwaves are beginning to line up with the people you're hanging out with. If you're in a relationship, you have to hide your true feelings. You can't be honest about your struggles. You're inauthentic. If we're in relationships where we choose to be inauthentic in order to fit in or be liked, that's a red flag. We should never settle for friends who force us to be something other than who we are right in this moment, or force us to pretend to be something else. Because if we do, we're not a very good friend. We're lying to them, and that's a horrible basis for a friendship. And we're lying to ourselves. If we do that long enough, we'll become someone who we'd never consciously choose to be. A third guardrail I want you to consider this morning is when you feel pressured to compromise on your values, on your beliefs. If you've got something in your life that has always been like a clear no, that's not wise for me to do, and all of a sudden you're hanging around a group of people and you go, that's a live option now. I'm thinking seriously about doing this. When it's always been a clear choice to say no, but now there's this argument going on in our head. Maybe I should. Maybe it's not as bad as I think. Maybe I'll just go, and they're always inviting me. When we find ourselves imagining something that has always been a solid no for us, when we find ourselves imagining what would be like if it became a yes, that's a warning. It should make us dig a little deeper, think a little harder, and figure out if maybe it was a bad guardrail or if we should honor the one that we just bumped up against. Fourth that I'd have you consider is this. When I think, I'll go, but I'm not going to participate. Let me ask a clarifying question. Would you accept that from your kids? I mean, imagine that is the conversation. I've had this with my kids, and thankfully we survived the conversation and they survived adolescence. I was thinking about going over to this house tonight. There's going to be 35, 40 kids there. I'm pretty sure the parents are out of town. I'm pretty confident there's going to be alcohol there. Some people are going to be drinking, and, some of the kids, because the parents aren't there, they're going to slip upstairs. There's bedrooms upstairs. I'm not going to describe what happens there, but Mom, Dad, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on, but I just want you to know I'm going to go, but I'm not going to participate in any of that. Every parent in the room, anyone in this room who has ever been a teenager and had a parent, knows what the answer should be in that circumstance, right? You need to trust your kids and go, great, go, have a good time. No. My kids would do that to us. We'd go, okay, here's two choices. I'm not saying no, but you have two choices. One is you decide this is not the right place for you to go. The other choice is, I'm going with you. That's a great parenting strategy. Kind of clarifies the whole thing for your kids. But what's funny is we wouldn't accept this from our kids, but we do it. I'll go, I just won't participate. When the conversation starts to happen in our heads, it should bother us. We've bumped up against a guardrail. The Holy Spirit is speaking to us. Now, at that point that we bump against the guardrail, very little damage has been done. That's why they're there. But if we push through it, we get in the danger zone. We can end up in the ditch and wreck our lives. What's the wise thing to do? One more, and it's a painfully clear one. When I hope that the people I care about don't find out where I am or what I'm doing. Even if we haven't done anything wrong. Even if we haven't broken any laws, we haven't done anything immoral, anything dangerous, we haven't been unfaithful. If we find ourselves not wanting to tell the people we love where we've been and what we've done, that should bother us. It should light up our conscience and at least make us question, is this the wise thing in light of my future hopes and dreams? Now, I am not naive. There are some of you sitting here this morning, here and through this whole series, have heard all this stuff about guardrails, and you feel like this is over the top, this is controlling, this just doesn't feel good. I mean, it might be good for the adolescents, in our family. It might be good for somebody who has an addiction issue. It might be good for somebody whose life is really out of control. I get that, but, these are not realistic for me. And I understand the struggle. But for me, I am passionate about these for you. And if I could get on my knees and beg you, and I thought it would make a difference, I would beg you to set up relational guardrails in your life. Because I've had for 35 years an opportunity to help people, but it's also this sadness in my spirit as I sit and listen to stories of the pain and the guilt and the grief that comes from people crashing through the guardrails in their life. For at least not stopping and considering when they brush up against the guardrail. What's the wise thing to do? So part of my passion around this series is I've listened to stories of people who've crashed through for 35 years. And part of it is just me being honest about my own journey, my own choices in my life, about who is in my life and how they're shaping me and changing the course of my direction. And honestly looking at my life sometimes and asking the question, is my life headed where I want it to go? There have been times, I think, for all of us where we've woke up in the morning, gone to the mirror and went, how did I end up here? How did I end up in this place in my life? How can I change? We need wisdom to do that. We don't need to sit around. We got enough junk in our own lives. We don't need to sit around and judge everybody else and figure out what they should do. We need to apply that wisdom to our lives, to our weaknesses, to our points of vulnerability, to our hopes and our dreams. What do you hope for? What are you dreaming for in your marriage, with your kids, with your finances, with your career, with your friends that you hang out with? What are your hopes and dreams in your relationship with the God who loves you, who has seen every word in every line of your story and loves you, and is waiting to remove the regrets, and is waiting to write a new chapter in your story? So this week, I just want to ask you to do this. I want to ask you to be honest with yourself. Pray, journal if you do journaling, have coffee with a close friend, do whatever it is that helps you process your thoughts and feelings, and be painfully honest about the relationships in your life. Are the guardrails set far enough back that they keep you from going into the danger zone? That they redirect your life, and are you paying attention to them? Live with this question this week. In light of my past experiences, in light of my current circumstances, and in light of my future hopes and dreams, What is the wise thing for me to do in each relationship in my life?